My husband's sister banned me from her Ivy League fundraiser. We don't want waitresses near CEOs. At the gala, the guest of honor froze when he saw me and asked, "Isn't she the coder who built our app?" My husband's sister whispered, "How could you not tell me she was the CTO?" 2 weeks later. I've never been the type to make a scene. I've always handled things privately, quietly, because that's how I was raised. Be composed, be humble, don't stir the pot unless you're ready to clean up the mess. But sometimes, the mess cleans itself. Or, in my case, the person who caused the mess trips and falls right into it. My name's Irene. I'm 43. I live in the Boston suburbs, and I've been married to Neil for almost 16 years. We have 2 kids, Hazel and Owen, 10 and 8, and a Labrador named Buttons. Our house is a little too big, our schedule's a little too tight, and our lives have always looked picture perfect on the outside. We even have the matching Christmas pajamas to prove it. But inside? It's been dull. Quietly resentful. The kind of marriage that runs on autopilot until something finally jolts it awake. Neil and I met in our late 20s. We were both living in Chicago then, him fresh out of grad school with his civil engineering degree, me just a year into my job at a boutique marketing firm. I was struggling, honestly. Eating boxed mac and cheese, living in a 1-bedroom walk-up, and juggling temp gigs on the weekends. But I loved the industry. I loved creating strategy out of chaos. Neil was steady. Practical. Always early, always clean-shaven, always the one who offered to split the bill even when I could barely cover mine. At the time, I found that incredibly grounding. We dated for 3 years, got married at City Hall with only our parents in attendance, and moved east when I was offered a promotion at a tech firm that was expanding its Boston office. Neil found a job easily, engineers are always in demand, and life took off from there. I don't think either of us ever really stopped to think about what kind of marriage we were building. We just did it. Mortgage. Kids. School drop-offs. Soccer practices. Meal planning. Birthday parties. The usual. My job grew. A lot. The company I joined at 29 was a modest operation, maybe 150 employees. It's now a global player, and I've been there every step of the way. I built the North American marketing division from scratch. I've led teams, launched billion-dollar campaigns, flown overseas to close deals that took months of preparation. But at home, all of that seemed invisible. Or maybe, dismissed. Neil never said anything cruel. He never stopped me from working. But he didn't really see it. When I'd get home late from a client dinner, he'd say things like, "Must be nice to eat out and call it work." When I traveled, he'd joke, "Another paid vacation, huh?" I always brushed it off. I assumed it was just his way of teasing. But after a while, it started to sting. I'd come back from a huge client win, like the time we landed the Ericsson account, which added $8 million in annual revenue, and he'd just say, "Cool. What's for dinner?" Still, I didn't push back. I just kept working. Providing. Building. I was so focused on holding everything together, work, kids, the house, that I didn't stop to examine how thin the foundation underneath me had become. It all came to a head at the company's quarterly showcase. A huge internal event where teams present their accomplishments to leadership, stakeholders, and occasionally family members. It's formal. Catered. Held in our main office's open auditorium in Back Bay. This one was especially important. Our team had pulled off a campaign that broke every projection, something we'd been working on for 6 months. I was proud. Like, deeply proud. Not just of myself, but of my team. These people had worked nights, weekends, missed vacations. We made it work. Neil had never attended before, but this time I invited him. I thought maybe seeing it up close would help him understand what I do. He wore a blazer and jeans. Looked sharp. We made small talk in the lobby as people filed in. He knew some of my coworkers, at least by name. He shook hands, smiled. seemed engaged. I gave my presentation third, right after the product and dev teams. I spoke clearly, showed the metrics, highlighted the team's effort. People clapped. There were nods, smiles, even a few surprised whistles when I revealed the ROI of the campaign. Afterward, there was a cocktail hour in the downstairs lounge, soft lighting, finger food, lots of little clusters of people talking shop. I was standing with Lucia, my lead strategist, Malcolm, our copy chief, and Jenna, our project manager, when Neil joined us. Lucia was in the middle of saying something kind. Irene, seriously, the way you handled the Anderson pivot? That was insane. I've never seen a redirect pull in better numbers than the original plan. Neil took a sip of his drink and said, she's just lucky. Right place, right time. Not everyone gets paid this much to delegate. He laughed. No one else did. I stood there, frozen. I smiled politely. My brain scrambled to decide what to do. Correct him? Defend myself? Walk away? Instead, I said nothing. Lucia's eyes met mine, and I could feel her second-hand discomfort. Jenna gave a tight-lipped smile. Malcolm glanced at the floor. Neil moved on like he'd said nothing at all. The rest of the evening blurred. I chatted, but I wasn't really present. Inside, something was unraveling. I kept replaying that moment again and again. He hadn't just embarrassed me, he'd invalidated everything I'd built. In front of the people who knew how hard I worked. At home, he was casual. Unbothered. He asked what I thought of the shrimp. Said he liked the lighting in the lounge. I went upstairs early and sat at the edge of our bed, staring at my open laptop. And then I remembered something. We use a shared budgeting tool. Both our W-2s were uploaded for tax planning. I opened the folder. There it was, Neil's W-2, $94,233 mine, $167,920, not including a $15,000 bonus I hadn't even added yet. The next morning, I printed them both. Quietly. Folded them. Put them in my work tote and waited. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. The team meeting that week wasn't anything special, just our usual Wednesday sync in the third-floor conference room with too many chairs and not enough coffee. We go over campaigns in progress, metrics, roadblocks. Everyone brings their laptops but usually just ends up talking. It's my favorite part of the week, honestly. It's when the team feels most like a team. I walked in a little earlier than usual and placed the 2 printed W-2s inside a folder I'd marked as performance notes. It wasn't some dramatic reveal. I didn't tape them to the wall or anything like that. I just waited for the moment. About halfway through the meeting, we were discussing the client backlog when Jenna said something like, "You've been doing more with less since Q3, Irene. Honestly, it's wild how you keep it all moving." Lucia nodded. Yeah, and you don't exactly have a small workload yourself. You're still running point on 3 major accounts. I don't know what came over me, but I reached into my folder, pulled out the papers, and slid them across the table. No big speech. Just, I thought you all might find this interesting. They hesitated at first. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Jenna leaned in. Lucia unfolded the top sheet and read it. Her eyes flicked to the second page. Then back to the first. Then back to me. There was a beat of silence. Then Lucia said, softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "Wow. That's embarrassing." A few others chuckled under their breath. Not mockingly. Not at me. But in that shared, knowing kind of way. The kind where the truth just confirms what everyone suspected but hadn't said aloud. No one asked for an explanation. They didn't need one. That meeting ended like any other. We wrapped up. Assigned next steps. Everyone filed out slowly. But the mood had shifted. Jenna patted my shoulder on the way out. Malcolm just gave me a nod, quiet, but it spoke volumes. And Lucia lingered for a second and said, "About damn time." I went back to my office, closed the door, and sat in my chair for a long time. I didn't feel vindicated, exactly. More like, calm. Like I'd taken back something that had been slowly chipped away for years. That night at home, Neil didn't say much. He was working on the garage light, muttering about a short circuit. We had dinner with the kids, Hazel talking about her science fair project, Owen explaining a board game I couldn't follow if I tried. The usual. After the kids were asleep, we were both in bed reading. Well, I was reading. Neil was scrolling through something on his tablet. Without looking up, he said, "Lucia texted me." I blinked. "Lucia?" He nodded. Said she thought I should know how my joke landed. Ah. I waited. "She thinks I'm a misogynist," he added, like it was somehow amusing. "Told me I should apologize to you." I stayed silent. After a few minutes, he put his tablet down and looked over. "I didn't mean anything by it, Irene. You know that, right?" I looked up from my book. "Do I?" He frowned. "Come on. You know I respect what you do." I closed the book. "No, Neil. I don't. I did think that for a long time. But then I started listening to how you talk about me. About my job. To me. To others." He looked annoyed now, defensive. "You're being dramatic." There it was again. That word. I got up, went to the bathroom, and brushed my teeth in silence. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted peace. And I was starting to realize peace wasn't going to come from him understanding me, it was going to come from me understanding myself, and acting accordingly. Over the next few days, things got tense. Polite, but clipped. The kind of politeness that comes right before something big breaks. We still passed the salt, still folded laundry, still talked about carpooling. But it was all surface level. Underneath, I was starting to detach. I began sleeping in the guest room. At first, I blamed his snoring. He didn't question it. I started spending more time at work, not working late exactly, just lingering. Coffee with Lucia after hours. A quick drink with Jenna. I wasn't avoiding home, but I wasn't rushing to get back either. It felt like I was watching my own life like a show I'd seen too many times. I knew all the lines. Knew when the tension would rise, when someone would apologize, when things would go back to normal. But this time I didn't want normal. I wanted something different. Real. About 2 weeks after the W-2 incident, I got an email from HR about my annual bonus. It was higher than expected, $22,500. I stared at the number for a long time. Then I booked a solo weekend in Provincetown. Just a little getaway. Nothing fancy. I told Neil I needed time to think. He didn't argue. Just said, "Sure. Let me know if you want me to take the kids." I left on a Friday morning. It was cold, gray, early March. The ocean looked like slate, the sky even duller. I walked the beach alone, wrapped in a too-thin coat, letting the wind bite my face. And for the first time in a very long time, I thought about what I wanted. Not what I should do. Not what would be easiest. Not what would keep the peace. Just what I wanted. And the scary thing was, I didn't know anymore. I just knew it wasn't this. When I got home, the house was clean. The kids were fed. Neil was pleasant. He asked how the trip was. I said, "Good." And that was that. But something had shifted in me. I'd gotten a taste of breathing room, and I wasn't ready to suffocate again. Things didn't explode right away after I came back. That's the thing with slow burn resentment, it doesn't often erupt. It just seeps. Quiet. Invasive. Like water damage behind drywall. You don't see the cracks at first, but eventually, everything starts to warp. Neil and I kept going through the motions. Wake up. pack the kids' lunches, complain about the traffic, divide up the weekend chores. He was trying to act normal, like nothing had changed. But everything had. One night, we were watching something forgettable on TV. Some crime drama with too many subplots. Neil was half asleep, slouched on the couch with a beer resting on his chest. I glanced over and really looked at him for the first time in a while. And I thought, I don't know this man anymore. Not in the dramatic, movie-style way. But in the quiet, mundane way that comes from years of small distances never closed. He used to ask me about my projects. About my coworkers. About what I was working toward. Now, he just nodded through dinner and went back to his phone. When he did bring up work, it was usually to downplay it. You guys get so many perks, or that must be nice, with that edge of resentment he never quite masked. And I think I finally saw what had been there for years, bitterness. Neil liked being the provider. The guy who fixed things. The one who people described as dependable. He never said it, but I think a part of him resented how much I had grown in my career, how I made more, how I was the one getting recognition, how I didn't need him in the ways he was used to being needed. It wasn't just that he didn't respect what I did. I think he felt threatened by it. And I'm not saying that makes him evil. Just human. Insecure. But I was tired of making myself small to protect someone else's ego. That following Monday, I scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I didn't tell him. I just needed information. Clarity. It wasn't a decision, it was an exploration. I spent an hour in a downtown office overlooking the Common, sitting across from a woman named Dina who looked like she could argue down a freight train. She was calm. Matter of fact. Asked all the right questions. Gave me a yellow legal pad and a pen. She said, "Let's talk options, not ultimatums." I liked that. Afterwards, I sat in a cafe on Tremont Street with a cappuccino that had gone lukewarm before I even touched it. I stared out the window at people walking by in puffy coats, earbuds in, faces buried in scarves. So many lives. So many decisions. All of us carrying things no one else could see. That week, I started sleeping in the guest room more often. No excuses. I didn't even pretend anymore. Neil didn't ask. He just turned off the lights at night and locked the door like always. Hazel noticed first. "Are you mad at Dad?" she asked one night while we were brushing our teeth. "No, sweetheart," I said. "We're just having grown-up conversations." She nodded slowly. "You're quieter." "He's been grumpy." I kissed the top of her head. "We'll figure it out." She looked unconvinced. And honestly? So was I. Work, in contrast, was thriving. The W-2 moment had become something of an inside joke around the office, never discussed directly, but definitely felt. My team was closer. There was a new energy in the way they looked at me. Like they finally saw the full picture. Lucia started inviting me to more social things. Jenna added me to her trivia group. Malcolm made me a custom Slack emoji with my initials and a little fire graphic. It was small, dumb, perfect. They respected me. And not just for the numbers. But for standing up without ever raising my voice. One afternoon, Malcolm passed me in the hallway and said under his breath, "If my partner ever did that in public, I'd still be sleeping on the lawn." I smiled. "Yeah. Well. Mine's still got a pillow inside." He shook his head. "Too generous." But not for long. I started therapy. I didn't tell Neil. I just said I was staying late for meetings, which wasn't technically a lie. I found a therapist named Bree who didn't ask me to unpack my childhood in the first 5 minutes. She just said, "What's hurting the most right now?" and waited. I told her everything. Slowly. Over weeks. How Neil used to lift me up but had started clipping my wings instead. How I didn't want to blow up our family, but I also didn't want to teach my daughter that this was okay. How I couldn't quite figure out when I stopped feeling safe in my own house. Bree listened. She nodded. She never interrupted. Then one session, she asked me a question I still hear in my head every day. What would you do if you believed you were allowed to want more? Not need more. Not deserve more. Just, allowed. It was such a simple question. But it cracked something open. I didn't have an answer. So I started imagining one. That weekend, Neil and I were cleaning the garage. He was on a ladder. I was handing him tools. It was the most we'd interacted in days. At one point, he looked down and said, "You've been working late a lot lately." Yeah. He hesitated. Is something going on I should know about? I looked up at him, blinking against the light. Would you want to know? He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just handed him the wrench. And that was the moment I realized something huge. I didn't want to fix us anymore. I wanted to fix me. A few days later, I decided it was time to move from quiet reflection to calm action. Not rage. Not chaos. Just a reset. Clean. Sharp. I didn't want to destroy Neil, I just didn't want to carry the weight of protecting his pride anymore. I'd spent years trying to soften myself so he wouldn't feel overshadowed. I dimmed my wins, dodged praise, stayed small. No more. That week at work, my boss pulled me into a meeting. He offered me a new position, Vice President of Global Marketing. A seat at the executive table. A team expansion. A salary bump that pushed me over $200,000. With stock options. It was everything I had worked for. When I told Neil that night over dinner, he was silent. The kids were chatting about something irrelevant. Hazel was excited about her class project. Owen was arguing about lizard facts. I dropped the news in between bites of salmon and salad. I got promoted, I said. VP of Global. Neil didn't congratulate me. He didn't even look up. He just said, "Guess you'll be working even later now." Hazel looked up, confused. That's good, right? I smiled at her. It's great. Neil got up to wash his plate without another word. That was the night I knew for sure, the person I had loved no longer existed in that house. Or maybe he never did, and I was just finally seeing him clearly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just moved forward. I waited until the kids were at school the next morning. Neil had left early to clear his head, which meant he was likely at the gym sulking or sitting in the hardware store pretending to shop. I pulled out the manila envelope I'd been filling for weeks, notes from my lawyer, lists of assets, a rough custody plan, and a letter. Not a scathing note. Not a dramatic goodbye. Just this, Neil, this has been coming for a long time. I've tried to have the conversation. You didn't listen. I've tried to show you what I do. You mocked it. I've worked hard to keep this marriage whole, but I won't keep shrinking to stay in it. I'm filing for divorce next week. The house will be sold. I've already spoken to an attorney. We'll split everything fairly. I won't fight you if you don't fight me. But I'm done. I wish you peace. I wish you self-awareness. And I hope you eventually understand what you had. Irene, I left the envelope on the kitchen island where I knew he'd find it. Then I went to work. I didn't wait around for his reaction. I didn't field the dozens of texts and missed calls that started pinging my phone an hour later. I muted them all. I had a leadership meeting to attend, and I walked into it with a clear head, steady hands, and my best damn blazer. Lucia found me in the break room that afternoon and handed me a coffee with a sly grin. You're glowing, she said. I smiled. I'm free. Neil, to his credit, didn't implode. He tried to negotiate at first, tried to bargain with the house, with the kids, with old promises. He said all the things he should have said years ago. I didn't mean it. I was just joking. I always admired you. I just didn't know how to say it. Too late. The split was civil. No drawn-out court battles. I didn't want revenge, I wanted closure. But karma? It has a beautiful sense of timing. About a month after the divorce papers were signed, Neil came by to drop off the kids. He stood on the porch looking sheepish. Same hoodie he always wore. Same way he kicked at the step while he waited for me to answer. I saw the article, he said when I opened the door. What article? The one in Forbes. Oh. Right. A journalist had written a piece about women in leadership, and somehow, my name ended up in there, alongside quotes from me about owning your voice, setting boundaries, and refusing to apologize for ambition. I nodded. Yeah. That was nice. He shoved his hands into his pockets. You really did all that? I just looked at him. Yes, Neil. I did. He stood there a second longer, like he was waiting for something. A smile. A compliment. Maybe an invitation in. I just waved at the kids over his shoulder. Hazel. Owen. Let's go. Neil walked back to his car in silence. 2 weeks later, I was promoted again. Chief Marketing Officer. CMO. I celebrated quietly with my team. No party. No grand announcements. Just a toast from Lucia in the office kitchen, who raised a glass of lukewarm Prosecco and said, "To the woman who taught us all how to win gracefully." I kept my new office minimal, glass walls, a single photo of Hazel and Owen on my desk, a sticky note in my drawer that simply said, "You are not small." And on the wall behind my chair? That same mug Lucia gave me after the W2 incident. Framed. Wow. That's embarrassing.